Imagine this. You're a college student, just got off of a long, hard night shift at work. You grab your things, walk to the car, and drive off into the night. You're thinking about homework, maybe going home to hang out with your friends, or maybe just getting a good night's sleep. But what you don't know is that someone has been watching and waiting for you to get into your car. That was the night of February 8, 2017, for 21-year-old Ohio State University student Raegan Tokes. She was a bright student whose life was full of promise, and what should have been a night that got her home safely turned into a night of terror, a night that would expose cracks in the Ohio State justice system and horrify an entire community and leave a family's lives shattered forever. This is her story. So welcome back to another Twisted Tuesdays true crime story. Happy Tuesday, everybody. So I didn't do a video last week. I'm gonna do 3 and then take 1 off. But I've been binge watching these true crime videos, and this one really stuck out to me. So I wanted to retell Raegan's story because her voice does deserve to be heard. So if you're new here, hello, and if you like the video, then leave a like and consider subscribing. It helps YouTube to push out our videos so more people can view them. And I would greatly appreciate it. And for you that are subscribed, I appreciate each and every one of you. So without further ado, let's get into the story of Raegan Tokes. She wasn't just another name in the news. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a confidant for a lot of people. She had her whole future ahead of her. Born in Monclova Township, Ohio in 1995, Raegan grew up in a very loving family that emphasized hard work, kindness, and education. Her friends and family described her as full of life, vibrant, outgoing, compassionate. And she had the rare ability to make people feel comfortable instantly, even ones that didn't know her. Raegan also excelled in school, not just academically, but she was also gifted with the ability to do sports. Her high school years were filled with honors classes, soccer games, and late nights with her friends. She also had a boyfriend, a serious boyfriend, all through high school, but they broke it off before she headed off to Ohio State. By the time she enrolled at Ohio State, she was already well focused on her goals. Her parents had instilled ambition and integrity in her, and then Raegan carried this on into her adulthood. She majored in psychology, where she was hoping to become a therapist or just a mental health counselor, somewhere where she can make a difference in someone's life. It always seems like these murderers, these monsters, they go after our best people, and our best good people are taken just one life at a time. So sad. But anyway, her friends at Ohio State described Raegan as a natural leader, someone who brought people together. She also worked part-time at Bodega, a popular restaurant and bar in the Short North area of Columbus. She was determined, motivated, and yet just wanted to have fun and enjoy being 21. And she was about to graduate in just 3 months. Raegan's Instagram feed was full of snapshots of her whole life. On campus, nights out with friends, fun photos of her laughing with other friends, and she also had a lot of pictures of there on there with her family that captured just how close she was with her family. She wasn't just another college student. She was someone who left an impression on everyone that she met. Her parents often spoke about how she was the glue of the family, and her younger sister adored her. Raegan often played the role of protector and mentor with her little sister. And I can know all about that because I've got 3 little girls that fight constantly. But if somebody else messes with one of them, you better believe they're all going to be on it. So I know exactly how that goes. And I can imagine her younger sister's loss. But she was fiercely loyal, and her parents never doubted for a second that she would go on to do amazing things in the world. But as much as Raegan was focused on her future, she was also just enjoying being 21. Like I said, movie nights, dinners out with friends, late night study groups, just having a good time. But she did have a steady rhythm to her life, and it did give her comfort and security. No one, not even Raegan herself, would have predicted that in early 2017 her path would cross with someone who had no regard for life, no heart, and no respect for women, no hesitation to destroy everything in his path. And that will bring us to the night of February 8th, 2017. Started out like any other day for Raegan. She got up, she went to classes, she texted her friends, checked in with her family as she always did, and went about her normal routine. That evening, she headed off to her part-time job at Bodega. It was a popular restaurant and bar. Raegan was known for being a hard-working employee at work. Her coworkers would say she would pick up any shift for you, and her manager said she was punctual and always dependable. That night, coworkers recall her laughing and just talking about the future, and didn't seem like she was worried about anything at all. When her shift ended at 9:30, Raegan clocked out, gathered her belongings, walked towards the restaurant's door, and went to the parking area, where she got into her 1999 silver Acura. A reliable car, not too flashy, just something to get her from point A to point B was all she needed. That's all that mattered. But she wasn't in a very good part of town. This part of town where she parked was known for being notorious, and crimes had been committed in that area before. For Raegan, though, the walk to her car was routine. She had done it many times, but she didn't know that this night her moves were being watched, every move she made. On surveillance cameras around the Northport area, ATMs, her final moments are captured on various bank ATMs and other surveillance footage from around the area. She unlocks her car, gets inside, and drives off. And what should have been a 15-minute ride home turned into a night that was a horrible nightmare. Somewhere along the way, a man forced himself into her car. His name was Ryan Golsby, a 29-year-old career criminal who had been released from prison just 3 months earlier. And when I tell you why he was there and what short of a time that he'd spent in prison, your blood is going to boil like mine did. He had viciously attacked a pregnant woman, assaulted her in front of her 2-year-old son. Yet, he was allowed to leave early from prison under the condition that he wore an ankle monitor, supposedly to track his every movement. But that night, the system failed. What happened next was every woman's worst fear. Raegan was carjacked, abducted, and driven against her will. The exact details of her terror remain just pieced together by investigators from what they had to go on. But it's believed that Golsby forced her to go around to different ATMs to try to withdraw money. And after she did, he drove her to Scotia Metro Natural Park. And it was a dark, isolated stretch outside the city. At 11:45 p.m., Raegan's friends began to worry. She hadn't come home, she hadn't returned text messages, and they just went unread. Her roommate, knowing Raegan's habits, immediately felt that something was off. By the next morning, her absence was undeniable. Raegan, the responsible, reliable young woman that she was, that always texted in with her family and friends, had simply vanished. Her car was discovered later abandoned on a road parking area of the Metro Park. Inside were signs of a struggle. It also looked like the car had been attempted to be set on fire, but thank goodness the car didn't burn up as Brian had hoped for, because the car was full of evidence. Outside, the silence of the park concealed the horrifying truth. Her parents, Lisa and Toby Tokes, were left to face a reality no parent should ever endure. Their daughter, who had been preparing to graduate in just a few months, was gone, vanished. Nobody could find her. Police already had a trail of clues, and the name of Raegan's killer would soon be revealed. The location of her car immediately raised red flags. This wasn't on her way home. It wasn't somewhere that Raegan would ever willingly go. It was really dark at night, and there was a lot of forest around. Just not the kind of place that she would ever go willingly. So police officers secured the scene and began combing through the area. They had tire tracks, footprints, and discarded items. They were carefully noted. Inside the car were signs of distress, disarray, and it suggested that Raegan simply didn't just park the car and walk away. The police also found a lot of ATM receipts in the car. That gave them a lead. All they would need to do is go to where that bank ATM was and review the surveillance footage. Not long after, though, a few hundred yards from where her car was discovered, the search turned into a nightmare. In a wooded area, a man was walking in the area and alerted police that there was a body. And once police saw the body, they knew almost immediately that it was the missing Raegan Tokes. She had been SA'd and fatally shot, execution style. Her uncle was the family member that lived closest to the scene, so he was ultimately the one to come and identify Raegan's body. The officers on scene were all visibly shaken, of course. For seasoned investigators, this is one case that was not going to leave them anytime soon. News spread quickly. By midday, local headlines said Ohio State University student found dead. On campus, students huddled together and held vigils, candles flickering in the icy air as hundreds gathered to mourn a young woman who some have never met, but they all felt connected to. Her parents, Lisa and Toby Tokes, were left to face a reality that no parent should ever have to endure. Their daughter, who had been just a few months away from graduating Ohio State University, was now brutally and senselessly gone. For Raegan's family, the call from police was the moment that their lives split into like a before and after. Her mother, Lisa, later said that losing Raegan was like losing the sun itself. Her father, Toby, described the horror of hearing the words that no parent should ever have to hear, that his daughter had been murdered. But as the police dug deeper, they found tons of clues that painted a chilling picture. They went to the ATM and reviewed the surveillance footage, and it showed Raegan being forced to withdraw money from her account the night she vanished. The transactions, combined with the evidence in the car's location, the forensic evidence, they also got some DNA out of the car, led to one horrifying conclusion. Raegan had been abducted, assaulted, burglarized, and later killed by someone who planned to attack her for money. And after numerous failed transactions, $60 was all he was able to get from Raegan before he senselessly ended her life. The question remained, though, to her family was, who was he? For the community, fear was rising. There was a predator roaming Columbus. Were their students' life safe? For Raegan's parents, it was even worse. They had to grieve while also praying for swift justice and an arrest. Detectives, meanwhile, were piecing together the trail, and soon the evidence would lead them directly to Brian Golsby, a man who should never have been free in the first place. Can't say that enough times. Brian Golsby was 29 years old at the time of Raegan's murder. On the surface, he looked like any other man blending into society, but beneath that exterior was a history of violence, manipulation, and a cruelty that had been ignored, overlooked, and badly mishandled by the system. Golsby's upbringing was filled with instability. He grew up bouncing between relatives, group homes, and the streets. His childhood was marked by neglect, poverty, and violence. By his teenage years, he had already begun committing crimes, burglary, theft, and later more violent offenses. But every time, he was hit with a slap on the wrist, basically, and sent back out onto the streets, which happens all too many times. In 2010, as I stated earlier in the video, he was convicted of kidnapping a woman at gunpoint, a pregnant woman, and S.A.ing her in front of her young son. This happened in the same Grove City area where Raegan's body would later be found. He was made to serve 6 years in prison for that crime. Only 6 years. And he was released early. And it's not like he was a model prisoner during his incarceration. He racked up 52 different infractions, disciplinary violations, from fighting to contraband to all kinds of different infractions while he was there. They actually had to move him 5 different times in his just under 6 years of being in prison. When he was released in November 2016, 3 months before Raegan's murder, he was placed under parole supervision. To monitor him, the state required him to wear the GPS ankle monitor bracelet. The theory was the device would track his every movement and keep him in check. But in practice, the ankle monitor was nothing more than a silent witness, because it recorded where he went, but it did nothing in real time to stop him, and nothing to prevent what he was capable of. In the weeks leading up to Raegan's death, Golsby terrorized women across Columbus, and nobody knew anything about it. That's so crazy. Reports show he was responsible for a string of robberies, kidnapping, and SAs on other women, just right in the weeks prior to her murder. And he would do the same thing, carjack women, force them to withdraw money out of the ATM, but this time, his crime had escalated into full-blown murder. On the surveillance footage captured, it shows Raegan being visibly distressed as she complied with his demands. He would later say that she did beg for her life, saying that she just wanted to live. But Raegan's ordeal didn't end there. Golsby drove her to the Scotia Grove Metro Park. In the dark, isolated woods, he SA'd her, and then, as if humiliating her wasn't enough, he took a gun and shot her twice, once in the head, once in the body, just like in an execution. When he left her there, he didn't run far, though. The next day, police were already hot on his trail. What horrified the public even more than Golsby's actions was this. He should have never been free in the first place. He should have never been in the position to kill Raegan. He was a repeat violent offender, a Tier 3 sexual offender with a history of SAs. He was on parole with a GPS ankle monitor. And yet, no one was watching closely. No one was analyzing the GPS data in real time. So he was, for all practical purposes, free. Raegan's death was not just the result of a predator's evil. It was the result of a broken system that failed her. Make no mistake about that. And now investigators were determined to prove that Golsby was the man responsible. The ankle monitor, the ATM footage, and the forensic evidence were about to seal his fate. On the night of February 8th, Golsby's GPS trail led from his halfway house to the short North District near Bodega, where she worked, to the ATM locations where Raegan withdrew the money, and finally to Scotia Grove Metro Park, where her body was found. The ankle monitor had tracked his every step. It was like a breadcrumb trail leading investigators directly to their suspect. Still, they needed more than circumstantial evidence, and soon they would have it. Forensics would provide it. The DNA match found in Raegan's car matched Golsby. It was a different link and a direct link between him and Raegan in the crime. Combined with the GPS data, investigators now had a case that was visibly unshakable. ATM cameras, parking lot footage, and witness accounts all corroborated the same story and placed Raegan in distress that night. A witness recalled seeing a suspicious man lingering in the area by her work. Another saw her Acura being driven erratically. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together. On February 11th, 2017, just 3 days after Raegan's murder, police arrested Brian Golsby at his halfway house. The arrest was swift and overwhelming. Officers described him as cold, detached, and uncooperative. At first, he denied everything. He denied involvement. He denied even knowing who Raegan was. But the evidence against him was already overwhelming. For Raegan's family, the arrest was bittersweet. Nothing could bring her back, but knowing that the killer was behind bars was a little bit of peace of mind for them. But the case was far from over. The trial would drag her family through every horrific detail of Raegan's murder. Her last hours and the system's failures would be laid bare for the world to see. By the time Brian Golsby was arrested, the case against him was already overwhelming. They had the GPS ankle monitor data, the DNA inside Raegan's car, and all the surveillance footage. They captured and created a timeline so clear that it seemed impossible for him to escape conviction. But in court, nothing is ever simple. And for Raegan's family, sitting through the trial meant reliving her murder all over again. The Franklin County prosecutors opened with a devastating narrative. They laid out Raegan's final hours, leaving her shift at Bodega, being carjacked at gunpoint, forced to withdraw money at the ATM, $60, driven to an isolated metro park, assaulted, and an execution-style murder. The prosecutors described Golsby as a predator, which he was, and he saw Raegan nothing more as just prey. They pointed to his prior convictions for kidnapping other women at gunpoint as proof that it's not an isolated crime and that he could do it again, and it was a pattern of violence. The ankle monitor data became a cornerstone of the case. Jurors saw maps of Golsby's movements in real time, plotted by point by point by point where he went that night, from the halfway house to the park where her life was ended. Forensic experts also testified about the DNA match, and that left no room for doubt that Golsby had been in Raegan's car. But his defense attorneys would attempt to create a desperate strategy. They admitted that he was involved in the Raegan's abduction, but they claimed he was not the one who killed her. They argued that in compliance, an unnamed man was the true killer. Golsby's attorneys said that their client had forced Raegan into the car and robbed her, but that the accomplice had been the one to SA and shoot her. The jury was not convinced, thank goodness. Prosecutors countered that no evidence supported the existence of a second person at all. It was made up. All the forensic evidence pointed directly to Golsby and no one else. It was there they argued that nothing more than a weak attempt to deflect responsibility from Brian Golsby was what the defense was trying to do. Perhaps the most difficult moments of the trial came, though, when Lisa and Toby Tokes spoke about their daughter's life, her dreams, her love for family, and the agony of losing her in such a brutal way. Lisa described the nightmare of receiving the call that her daughter had been murdered. Toby fought back tears as he talked about Raegan's smile, her energy, and how she had been preparing to graduate in just 3 months. Their testimony moved the courtroom to silence. Jurors, reporters, and even seasoned officers admitted that they later struggled to keep their emotions in check. Some of them kind of teared up. After weeks of testimony, though, and closing arguments, evidence was so overwhelming, the jury deliberated for only 90 minutes. The weight of the evidence was overwhelming. So, on March 13, 2018, the jury found Brian Golsby guilty on all counts: aggravated murder, kidnapping, rape, and aggravated battery, and robbery. The next phase would determine his sentence: life in prison or the death penalty. The sentencing hearing was another ordeal for Raegan's family. Prosecutors argued that Golsby's history of violent crimes, combined with the brutality of Raegan's murder, justified the death penalty. The defense tried to humanize him, though, and saying that he grew up in a traumatic childhood, and arguing that society had failed him. They claimed he didn't deserve to die for the mistakes of a broken system. On March 16, 2018, the jury recommended the death penalty. The judge agreed, sentencing Brian Golsby to death. For Raegan's parents, the sentence was not closure. Lisa and Toby said nothing could ever bring their daughter back, but they hoped the verdict would prevent another family from suffering the same fate as they did. Still, their fight wasn't over. Raegan's murder had exposed systematic failures that allowed Golsby to walk free in the first place, and her parents were determined to make sure that no other young woman's life could be stolen the way Raegan's had been. When the gavel fell and Brian Golsby was sentenced to death, many thought the story had reached its end, but for Raegan's family and the state of Ohio, it was only the beginning. It'd be a different kind of battle, though, one that would be fought not only with evidence and testimony, but with legislation and reform. Lisa and Toby Tokes left the courtroom with heavy hearts. The justice system had delivered the harshest penalty to Brian Golsby, but their daughter was still gone. In interviews after the trial, Lisa said, "We live with a hole in our hearts every single day. We will never get to see our daughter graduate, get married. Brian Golsby stole that from us. She'll never have children. He stole that from us." Toby echoed the sentiment, describing how her once vibrant family now lived in the shadow of grief. Raegan's younger sister struggled deeply, missing not only her sibling, but also the person she looked up to as a role model. The Tokes family could have retreated into their grief, understandably so. No one would have blamed them. But instead, they chose to honor Raegan's memory by fighting for change. Raegan's murder exposed glaring failures in the Ohio's parole system. Here is a man who had a history of kidnapping women. He was considered a high-risk offender. Remember, he was Tier 3 SA offender. He was wearing an ankle monitor, GPS tracker, and he was supposed to be supervised by parole officers. And yet, he was free to roam the city, free to terrorize women, and free to abduct and kill Raegan, ultimately. The GPS device recorded his movements, but no one was actively monitoring him in real time. Each of his crimes in the weeks before Raegan's deaths could have been prevented if the system had responded sooner. The public was outraged when they found all this out. Parents of Ohio State students demanded answers. Lawmakers faced pressure to fix what they had so clearly failed. The result of their efforts was the Raegan Tokes Act, introduced in Ohio shortly after her murder. The act sought to strengthen sentencing for violent offenders, give the Department of Rehabilitation and Correction more authority to keep dangerous criminals behind bars if they think that they might or are still considered a threat. And also to improve supervision of parolees. especially those wearing GPS monitors. Start making them actually monitor their parole offenders. It wasn't an easy fight, though. Some argued that the law gave too much power to correction officers and officials, while others claimed it wouldn't be enough to fight future tragedies. But through their grief, Lisa and Toby Tokes stood in front of lawmakers, news cameras, and the public demanding action. Their message was simple: Raegan's death could not be in vain. And by 2018, the act passed, making a historic change in Ohio's criminal justice system. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave Raegan's family and countless Ohioans a sense that something good can come from an unimaginable tragedy. Raegan's story resonated far beyond Columbus. It went national. People across the country saw her and their own daughters and sisters and friends. A bright young woman with her future stolen, as we see so many times as we retell these cases. College campuses across Ohio reviewed their safety measures. Students became more vigilant, started traveling in groups, demanding better parking areas and lit up parking areas, and calling for stronger protections. I'm so glad. Lisa once said, "We couldn't save Raegan, but if her story can save someone else, then we will keep telling it." And that is exactly what I'm doing here today. We're retelling her story. That's also why I'm really passionate about researching and retelling these crimes. People deserve to live, and if they can't, their voices still deserve to be heard. The law now bore her name, the Raegan Tokes Act, but more importantly, so did the fight for safer communities. Raegan's memory became a symbol of resilience, of how love can fuel change in even the darkest of times. Still, for those who knew Raegan best, the impact of her loss could never fully be captured by legislation or headlines. For them, Raegan wasn't just a case. She was the light of their lives, gone too soon. And so we come to the end of the story, not with closure, because there can never be closure, but with remembrance. As we close this story, we remember not just the horror of what happened to Raegan, but we remember the beauty of who Raegan was. So, thank you guys for joining me on another Twisted Tuesdays True Crime Special. We will always remember Raegan Tokes. May she rest in peace. And thank you for spending your time with me today. Thank you for trusting me with your time. If you found this video meaningful, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us keep continuing telling these stories, keeping victims' memories alive, and shining a light on the dark truths that need to be told. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and always take care of each other and trust your gut. I'll see you next Tuesday, guys. Bye!